Well, welcome back to The Gamble, and you're already in session 4, which tells me a whole lot about you because it means that you not only joined a group or showed up at the group you're already in, but you're already 4 weeks in and committed to it, which tells me a lot about your commitment to your own spiritual life and really to encourage the lives of other people. And I hope that by now you've either grown deeper with people you already knew, or maybe you've met some new people and you now have some traveling companions in life, and it makes all of life better because we can't go it alone. So way to go on that. And today we're talking about another bad bet that we base our lives on, that kind of fuels us whether we realize it or not. And today we're talking about greed, the desire for more, and the feeling that with just a little bit more, the better life will be, the more satisfied I'll be, the more contented I'll be. And of course it doesn't work that way, and we'll talk about that. And after all, here we are in Vegas, right, which is really fueled by greed. I've been here for about 36 hours now, and it's not my jam. I've learned that. I'm ready to go somewhere else. And I have friends who love coming to Vegas and who make a big deal about it. I guess it's like when people know that I love to play golf and they're like, who would want to do that? Or that I love to ski. And they're like, isn't it cold? Aren't you going to get hurt? Aren't you too old to do that? Or I like to scuba dive, and people are like, well, what about sharks? And I would never do that. Why would you ever want to go where you can't breathe and that kind of stuff? So I get it. We don't all understand each other's big thing. And as I said, I have some friends who love coming out here, and and I'm all for it. They have a very controlled experience here. They don't get carried away. It's just a fun time. But I have a feeling that that's not the norm, that a lot of people who come here don't have this controlled experience. They get out of control, and they let greed fuel them and get them in all kinds of trouble, because that's ultimately what greed does. It leads to regret, it leads to shallowness. But it's not just Vegas that's fueled by greed. Well, let's face it, our whole culture is fueled by greed. We're in a consumption-driven culture, the desire for more, which is why in my golf addiction, right, I'm always thinking about the next club that I don't have yet that's gonna change my game. Or I'm skiing, the next pair of skis, or the next location, or the next pair of boots, or whatever. Always on my mind, that desire for more. And really the lie is, again, just a little bit more and life will be great. Just a little bit more and I'll be content. A little bit more and I can be generous then. And the reason that's such a fallacy is because greed is an appetite. And appetites don't go away. You can satisfy them for a little while, but they just keep coming back, like eating. Our film crew that's out here in Vegas, not too long ago, we went to an all-you-can-eat sushi place, which sounded like a really, really great idea at the time, until at least I ate way too much. And so I'm feeling that. And right now I feel like, man, I never want to eat again. I'm never going to eat again. Food is disgusting to me. But that's not going to last long, because tomorrow morning I'll be in the airport and there's a Chick-fil-A. And I know I'm going to eat, and I've already thought about it. It's already a plan, because that's the nature of an appetite. So what do you do with an appetite like greed? Because it's not going to go away. Well, just like lots of other appetites, you make sure that you turn it a healthy direction. Like with eating, you can have a bad diet or a good diet. You have to change your diet if you want to be healthy. Same way with a desire for more. Instead of just more stuff, to shift to a much healthier approach, a much healthier diet. Jesus told a story about that when he talked about greed. And I think it's one of my favorite stories that he told. It's in Luke chapter 12. He told it to a couple people who were arguing with each other and came to him with a financial dispute to help resolve it. And Jesus then told this story about greed. Then he said, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. That's another way to talk about our bad bet today. Then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, what should I do? Actually, in the original language, Greek, original language in the New Testament, he says to himself, self. What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops. Then he said, I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, he calls himself my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God, or not be rich toward God. Jesus called the rich man a fool, not because he was rich, or not because he worked hard. That's all good. That was a product of his wisdom. But he just chose not to be rich toward God. He bought into the fallacy of greed, that the more he had, the happier he would be, the better off he would be, and that he would have it made. That extra wasn't so much for others, but extra was for him. And therefore, he ended up with nothing to show for his life, only regret. And that's where greed will drive us every time. And what Jesus was pointing to was this transition to a healthier diet, to take that desire for more, and instead of just more stuff that doesn't matter in the end, more impact. Instead of being consumption driven, more, to be generosity driven, more and more impact, more and more of God's blessing, more and more of His enablement in my life. Over the years, I've seen hundreds of people, Jesus followers, make that really difficult shift. It's always hard to get a healthy diet, but to say, I'm going to shift, even in consumer culture, I'm going to shift from being consumer driven to being generosity driven. And I've never had one person that I know of who wanted to go back, who thought, oh man, I gave away so much. I enabled so much good things to happen. That was really stupid. I wish I just had more crud. I've never had anybody do that. As people have seen how God opens up His blessing and His enablement in our life when we honor Him this way. And how do you do that? How do you switch diets? You just start obeying. You start doing it, and then God responds. The Bible talks about, and I want you to talk about this in your group, 3 kinds of generosity: systematic generosity, spontaneous generosity, and sacrificial generosity. Systematic generosity just says, hey, off the top of your budget, choose a percentage that you can be cheerful about and get started and begin to give and build your budget around giving, around others, not just more stuff, and see what God does. That's systematic giving. And then spontaneous giving is you're just open and have your eyes open and your arms open, hands open to say, man, when God prompts me, I want to be available. And then sacrificial generosity, unique opportunities like our Here for Good project, things like that come up where you're like, man, above and beyond, I have the opportunity to sacrifice and then be part of what God is doing in a bigger way. This has always kind of been processed because we are a consumption-driven culture. It's so easy to buy into the lie that just a little bit more, and then I'll be set, then I'll be fine, a little bit more, then I can be generous. And so we just wait for that to happen rather than, hey, let's start now. And wherever we're at, to be open to taking new steps, not to buy into the bad bet, not to buy into the lie, because greed will lead to nowhere. Greed will lead to nothing. But generosity leads to joy. Generosity leads to God's blessing, His enablement, and a life of impact. And so be really honest with your group. This is really hard to do. This is like advanced group stuff. You're in week 4. I think you can handle it. Just say, hey, where am I at in all this? And what have I learned? And where is it a struggle for me? Have a discussion about greed, which is not easy, and a discussion about generosity, but I know it'll be profitable. Let's help each other avoid this bad bet.